Welcome back, Tyrants. This time I have another One Piece discussion video, and this one was actually brought about by a few things I've just been noticing as I look at the community and different YouTubers and how everyone's been reacting to pretty much Wano in a nutshell, but also a lot of, I want to say, post-time skip chapters. We've been seeing a lot of this. And what I'm talking about is making judgments on chapters just as they come out. So, we get a new chapter and then we make a flock of judgments on that chapter without really considering the possibilities of the future and without really thinking about what happened in the past. And I'm not talking about like the idea of making predictions or just reacting to what's happened in that chapter. I'm more of talking about making judgments on the series based on what one chapter shows, and kind of carrying on those judgments until you get proven otherwise. While that may sound confusing, I want to go ahead and jump into an example so that it kind of better explains my idea. In the latest chapter, in 993, we get kind of the resurgence of Kaido. We get Kaido who's done taking hits, done dealing with all the nonsense, and he's back in prime fighting form. Now, the thing about this is that Kaido's been taking hits for probably the last 2 or 3 chapters. The Scabbards have just been laying into him with everything they've got, just trying their hardest to do some damage. And they've been cutting him up a little bit. We're getting blood from different kinds of epic moves. And it's interesting to see that because we as readers had this preconceived notion that the Scabbards weren't that good, that the Scabbards weren't on a level in which they could hurt Kaido. And I'm part of that too. I didn't think that the Scabbards were as good as they could have been. And I think that has more to do with betrayal. We really didn't see them do a whole lot up until this fight with Kaido. The most we saw was Ashura Doji fighting Jack. And for me, that put Ashura Doji as the strongest of the Scabbards. When I saw that, I put him as the strongest as he had the best feat of the Scabbards. But for the rest of them, they really hadn't done a whole lot. You have Inuyasha and Nekomamushi who fought Jack, for, 5 days, day and night. But that's kind of a different feat, They traded off positions, they got some rest in, came back later. That whole ordeal was a bit more complicated to kind of explain as to how strong someone was. But now we have all of these Scabbards fighting against Kaido and doing damage, and all of a sudden we see things like, maybe Kaido's not as strong as people say he is. Kaido's just hyped up. Kaido's the weakest Yonko. And none of that really makes sense. Because we see in the latest chapter that, he's not really fazed by anything. Sure, he's been bleeding a little bit, but that's not a big deal. He gets up, says, "You didn't even open my old wound." And this is after 4 people, probably the strongest of the Scabbards, did Oden's move right on his old scar. And he said, "You didn't even open the wound. You didn't even do as much damage. 4 of you don't match up to Oden." And now he's done. Now he's done playing around. And now he's fighting back. And we've already got Kiku, who lost an arm, Blade's done. We've got Kawamatsu, who's been shot off somewhere. We're seeing Kaido take things seriously. And the reaction to people seeing that is okay, finally Kaido's doing something. And it's well, it was never that he wasn't doing something. This is Kaido. We've already been introduced to this. This is how, when he interacted with Luffy, this is how he acted. He let Luffy get in shots. He let Luffy go gear 4. He let Luffy gear 3rd. Elephant guns, Kong organs, everything. He let Luffy go in as hard as he could. And once Luffy did everything he could, he deemed Luffy unworthy and one-shot him. And I remember when that was happening. I remember in chapter 922 when Luffy first hit Kaido in the head and knocked him down. People were livid. People were like, "Oh snap, Luffy's about to beat Kaido. Luffy's about to actually do some damage to Kaido." And it's the idea that we're making these assumptions without considering what's going to happen next chapter. And automatically saying okay, so Luffy's dealing damage, alright, so Luffy's got to fight here. Luffy's going to fight Kaido and he's going to do something, he's going to win. He has a possibility of winning. And I think there's a bit of a discrepancy between people who have just started reading the series and people who have been in it for a while. Because people who have been in it for a while know to trust Oda. They know that no matter what happens in one single chapter, when we get that next chapter, the chapter after that, things are going to make sense. That's just how Oda writes. That's how One Piece has always been. things make sense. So when we see, Dragon Form Kaido in 921, and then we see Luffy land a hit on him in 922, we don't immediately think like, oh, it's all for show. Oh, Luffy can match up to Dragon Kaido. We're like, okay, so next chapter, he's gonna get one shot. Or next chapter, maybe not one shot, but next chapter, he's gonna lose. Like, he's not winning this fight. And he didn't. He didn't win that fight. Obviously, he didn't win that fight. But the weird thing was that the people who were saying, like, in chapter 922 that Luffy might have a chance were also saying in 923 that, of course, Kaido one-shot Luffy. Of course, he couldn't match up. So it's the idea that, this one chapter deems the series, and this one chapter kind of explains what's going to happen, is the issue that I'm kind of talking about. And the fact that we were seeing it recently, with Kaido and the Scabbards, just shows that it's been happening again. And I just personally feel like it's unfair to the series. It's unfair to Oda to critique things when we have no idea how they're going to turn out. I mean, no one could have predicted this chapter, but everyone was ready to give up on Kaido for saying, like, okay, he's taking damage for like 3 chapters. This invincible beast of a man is actually taking damage. He's weak, he's pathetic, get him out of here. And it's like, he hasn't even really done anything yet. He hasn't shown that he's actually, blown back from this damage. He's bleeding. That's it. That's all. He's bleeding. That's a big feat, yeah, but that's it. And the fact that people are willing to damage control for events that haven't happened yet. Like, when Luffy punched Kaido, there are people talking about, okay, so if Luffy beats Kaido, it's because Kaido is drunk. If Luffy beats Kaido, it's because Luffy hit him on the head and that disables a dragon's flight. They were making reasons for why Luffy was going to win, even though that wasn't really the case. It wasn't necessary. People are automatically saying, okay, so this is how it's going to go, and this is how we can rectify it. When in all honesty, we kind of just need to let the chapters happen. Like, speculating and having discussions and theories is one thing, but going to such a degree in which you're like, okay, so since this is going to happen next chapter, this is how we can interpret it. I feel like that's a bit much. I feel like that's not giving Oda the respect he deserves for his story. And so when we have things like what's happening now, I mean, Kaido is just being Kaido. He's not different. He hasn't changed. He's still the same person he was at the beginning of Wano. Yet the opinion of him has been so turbulent just based on like a chapter to chapter basis. And I feel like that doesn't make sense. You can't judge a character based on just 1 or 2 chapters. It's the whole of the character and everything they do. So now that Kaido's, cutting off arms and whatnot, Kaido's back up. Kaido's back on the top of the list. And to be honest, there's probably going to be something that brings him back down and something that brings him back up, just because the mentality of judging per chapter is so prevalent. And I want to kind of end off the discussion talking about Kaido's introduction and where they say he's the strongest land, sea, and air, if it's a 1v1 battling Kaido, things like that. For one, when it comes to titles such as like strongest, when it comes to epithets and things like that, I always trust the info boxes. So, when you get that panel that says, for example, Whitebeard, when they give you Whitebeard's name, it says Whitebeard, the world's strongest man. That is his title, and I think that de facto makes him the world's strongest man. I don't question that. When we get Kaido, we don't get we don't get a board that says like 1v1 Kaido wins. That's something that's stated throughout the world. People say that if it's a 1v1, bet on Kaido because he's probably going to win. Kaido's thing is that he's the world's strongest creature. That's his description. There's no like invincible Kaido or unkillable Kaido. That's not part of his epithet. People don't call him that. He's just known to be really durable. So when people see him like taking damage, they're like, oh, so all that stuff was lie, all that stuff was hype. And it's like, for one, they never said that he was invincible. They said that he can't be killed. And so far, true to form, he hasn't been killed. So I don't know what the big deal is with that. I think the idea is that we took the idea of him being a Yonko, and we took the idea of him being unkillable, and we combined that to make him invincible. And that's not the case. I don't think there's any character in One Piece that's invincible. One of the things about One Piece is that every single person in One Piece has the ability to be defeated. No one is absolutely stronger than anyone else without the possibility of going down. And I think that's one of the good things about One Piece. There aren't these people that are insurmountable. You have people that stand at the top, but like Whitebeard said, he can't be the strongest forever. He can't stand at the top forever. At the end of the day, people fall. At the end of the day, people at the top fall to the bottom. They die, they leave, they stop. Whatever you want to call it, it happens. It's a natural progression of power. The Doflamingo even says power degrades over time. Like, there's so much to the idea of a person being strong and the idea of them being defeated in One Piece that it's hard to criticize what's happening to Kaido as a bad thing, because Kaido was never made to be invincible. Kaido was never made to be this person that just absolutely can't be defeated. He's the world's strongest creature. That is what we hold to him. The idea of him winning a 1v1, the idea of him being invincible, that stuff is more fan conjecture than anything else. And while I will admit myself, it is surprising to see him take damage. It is surprising to see him kind of, being pushed back. I don't think it's impossible. He's fighting a 9v1, and he's fighting 9 samurai that were trained by Odin, that followed his style, learned his Ryo. I mean, what do we expect from these guys? I know we haven't seen a whole lot, but should we really be surprised that in a 9v1, Kaido is taking some damage? Even though it's not fact, it says in a 1v1, bet on Kaido. It says nothing about 9v1s, and honestly, he's doing great for a 9v1. Especially since he really hasn't taken any, lethal injuries. At most, he's scratched up. So, I guess my whole ordeal with the idea of making speculations and stuff is that we gotta give more credit to the upcoming chapters. We have to always have that idea of, this is happening now, but that doesn't define what's going to be happening for the rest of the arc. Just because Kaido is taking damage in chapter 992 doesn't mean he's going to be taking damage in 993. One Piece is so dynamic that things change on a chapter-to-chapter basis, and we just have to be prepared for that. All in all, to say that, reevaluating a character or a portion of One Piece based on one chapter doesn't make a whole lot of sense. There's a good chance that something you find wrong or confusing will be rectified very shortly, and you just gotta trust Oda. That's the one thing I can say. For reading One Piece for 20 years, I've learned to trust Oda. Oda always brings back what he's trying to bring, even if it looks weird leading up to that point. Sometimes it does, but he'll bring it back. It'll be fine. So that's all I have to say on this. Let me know if you guys agree, disagree. Feel free to like, dislike, subscribe, and have a good one. Bye.